Respect doesn't begin with how others treat you. It begins with how you allow yourself to be treated, how you carry yourself when no one is watching, how you speak to yourself when it's just you and your thoughts. Self-respect is the foundation. Everything that follows, how others perceive you, how they approach you, how they talk about you when you're not there. It all begins with how you've trained the world to treat you, and that training starts with the standard you hold yourself to. People don't respect what you say you want. They respect what you refuse to tolerate. And you don't make that known by raising your voice or demanding attention. You make it known by how quickly you walk away from things that insult your soul. You don't attract high-value relationships, opportunities, or energy by looking the part. You attract them by being the part, by showing up with integrity, by being rooted in your values, by not entertaining what doesn't align with who you're becoming. And when people see that, they adjust their behavior around you. They may not be able to explain why, but something about your energy makes them pause. It makes them more careful, more intentional, because you carry a quiet message that says, I don't play with disrespect. Not even from myself. You hold yourself to that line first, and that's why others follow. When you start respecting yourself, you stop chasing approval. You stop needing to be chosen, liked, validated. You don't bend to fit rooms. You don't shrink to avoid discomfort. You don't overextend yourself just to keep peace. You understand that peace with others means nothing if it costs you peace with yourself. You protect your time, your mental space, your emotional energy like it's sacred, because it is. You've seen what happens when you don't. You've lived the chaos of giving too much, saying yes too fast, staying too long. And now you choose differently. Not out of anger, but out of awareness. People can feel when you've done the work, when you've healed, when you've faced your own darkness and didn't flinch. That kind of inner stability creates external authority. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain why you won't tolerate disrespect, manipulation, inconsistency. You just don't. And that just don't becomes your reputation. People learn quickly who they can and can't test, who they can speak to however they want, and who makes them pause before they try. And that pause, that moment of hesitation before someone disrespects you, that is earned, not requested. That is the result of deep, unwavering self-respect. When you carry self-respect, your boundaries aren't announcements, they're energy. They're built into how you speak, how you move, how you react, or how you don't. You no longer feel the need to clap back or defend yourself every time someone pushes. You don't react to provocation because you understand that not every challenge deserves a response. Self-respect gives you the power to walk away, not because you're afraid, but because you're beyond the noise. You don't engage where your values are at risk. You don't fight where you're not honored. You don't invest where there's no return on emotional equity. And let's be honest, people are watching. Always. Not for what you say, but for what you allow. They watch what you excuse, what you tolerate, what you let slide in silence. If you keep allowing the bare minimum, don't be surprised when that's all you receive. If you keep staying where you're undervalued, you teach people that's what you're worth. That's not their fault. That's yours. Because you trained them. You set that tone. And the moment you realize that, you take your power back. You stop waiting for others to shift. You shift first. You raise the bar, not for them, but for you. Self-respect is not loud. It's not ego. It's not superiority. It's clarity. It's the ability to know what aligns with your peace and what doesn't. It's choosing solitude over chaos. It's saying no without guilt. It's removing yourself without needing closure. It's knowing that you don't owe access to everyone, and that access to you is a privilege, not a right. You don't just give yourself away because someone shows interest, says the right thing, or plays nice for a few weeks. You watch, you listen, you observe patterns, you measure consistency, because you've been through too much to gamble your peace on potential. When you respect yourself, you don't chase anything. Not people, not titles, not attention. You attract, and what you attract reflects who you've become. You stop settling because you understand that what you settle for is what you're saying yes to. And every yes you give to something beneath your worth is a no to something aligned with your power. So you choose differently. You pause before responding. You remove yourself before disrespect escalates. You check in with yourself before compromising. That is the life self-respect creates. A life where your values are your filter, and anything that can't pass through them doesn't get a seat at your table. There is a kind of strength that speaks louder than words, and it's called silence. Not the silence that comes from fear or uncertainty, but the kind that comes from control. From choosing not to react. From knowing that presence carries more weight than performance. You don't need to overshare to be powerful. You don't need to explain your every move, every thought, every decision. The most magnetic people are the ones who know how to hold something back, not because they're hiding anything, but because they don't need the world's validation to confirm their direction. In a culture addicted to oversharing, mystery becomes power. When you can sit in a room, speak less, and still shift the energy, that's presence. That's not built on appearance. It's built on restraint. It's built on the ability to choose your words with precision, to let people wonder, to let your actions speak while your mouth stays still. You stop trying to fill silence with noise. You stop trying to control people's perceptions of you. You let them assume, you let them guess. And while they're focused on understanding you, you stay focused on building, on growing, on moving with intention. People who overshare are often trying to compensate for insecurity, for doubt, for a lack of clarity. When you know who you are and what you bring to the table, you don't need to speak on it all the time. You let the room feel it. You let your energy do the heavy lifting. And that quiet confidence, it draws people in. Because we live in a world where most people shout to be heard. So when someone walks in and doesn't compete for attention, but still commands it, it disrupts the room. Silence disrupts. Because it's unexpected. Because it's rare. Because it makes people lean in instead of tune out. You become attractive when you don't need to broadcast your value. When you don't oversell. When you don't seek confirmation through conversation. You start to realize that silence filters the room for you. It separates those who are curious from those who are careless. It reveals who's paying attention and who's just there for noise. When you stop giving people unlimited access to your thoughts, you start noticing who's worthy of hearing them. That's when your words start landing with more impact. Because now, when you speak, people know it matters. You haven't been exhausting the room with chatter. So when you do choose to say something, it has weight. Your silence is not just a boundary. It's a form of emotional intelligence. It means you've learned not to react to everything. You've trained yourself to observe before you respond. You don't rush to correct people's wrong assumptions about you. You don't chase misunderstandings. You don't hand out explanations like apologies. Because you understand that not everyone deserves a full download of your mind. You protect your peace. You hold your vision close. You let people experience the outcome, not the process. When you practice silence, you also practice discipline. You build the ability to withhold unnecessary details. You stop giving away your power in casual conversations. You stop needing to be liked, understood, or approved of. You don't speak to please. You speak to impact. And the more comfortable you become with saying less, the more powerful your presence becomes. People start to notice the difference between someone who talks a lot and someone who says very little but makes it count. That difference makes you magnetic because people feel the strength of your self-control, and they either rise to meet it or they fall away. There's a reason elite professionals, whether in intelligence, leadership, or strategy, don't overshare. They understand that information is leverage. That mystery is influence. That when people can't predict you, they can't control you. And when they can't place you in a category, you become unforgettable. The quiet ones are the ones you remember. Not because they demanded it, but because their presence made you question yourself. That's the kind of impression silence leaves. It doesn't just fill the room. It changes it, and silence doesn't mean absence. It means restraint. It means you're choosing not to move unless it's with purpose. You're choosing not to speak unless it adds value. You're choosing not to respond unless it's worth your time. That's not detachment. That's power. It's knowing you don't need to rush to be seen or heard because you're already centered within yourself. You're not looking for the spotlight. You are the light, and that kind of presence doesn't need noise. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need attention. It just needs consistency and clarity. So when people ask why you're so quiet, why you're so reserved, why you don't say much, understand that's the point. You don't need to be louder to be seen. You need to be more intentional, more focused, more self-aware. You've mastered the art of letting your energy speak long before your words do. And that art, that discipline, is what separates the magnetic from the desperate, the powerful from the performative, the respected from the reactive. You can look good, speak well, dress sharp, and walk into a room with everything polished on the outside. But if your energy's off, people will feel it. It's not about the surface, it's about what radiates underneath. Because energy doesn't lie. You can say all the right things and still make people uncomfortable if your energy is chaotic, anxious, desperate, or performative. You can stay quiet and still command a room if your energy is aligned, stable, and centered. People respond to how you make them feel more than they respond to what you say. That's why some people are magnetic without effort, and others can't hold attention. No matter how much they try, you can't fake alignment. You can fake confidence for a moment, posture for a crowd, wear something bold to overcompensate, but people will always remember how you made them feel. Energy can't be edited. It's sensed. It's absorbed. It's understood beyond logic. That's why the most attractive people aren't always the most traditionally beautiful or the loudest in the room. They are the ones who have mastered how to be present without needing to prove anything. They're calm in chaos. They're clear in confusion. They know who they are, and that knowing creates gravity. It pulls people in without chasing, without convincing, without effort. When your energy is aligned, you walk differently. Not in arrogance, but in assurance. You don't need to perform. You don't need to dominate every conversation. You just show up, fully in control of your presence. And that control, people feel it. They may not be able to explain it, but they respect it. They lower their voice around it. They second-guess crossing it. Because when someone is truly aligned, they don't flinch and they don't waver. That kind of energy can't be learned in a seminar. It's built in silence, in healing, in discipline, in knowing your value so deeply that you don't compromise it for attention, connection, or comfort. The way you carry yourself tells the truth, even when your words don't. That's why pretending never lasts. Eventually, the real you shows up. And if that version hasn't done the internal work, your relationships, your leadership, your impact, they all collapse. You can't build real attraction on fake energy. You'll always end up exhausted trying to maintain an identity that doesn't match your internal state. But when you're authentic, when you're honest with yourself, when you stop hiding behind image and actually do the work to become solid from the inside out, everything changes. People feel safer around you. They trust you more. They lean into your presence without knowing why. Energy is language. It communicates before you speak. It tells people if you're anxious, calm, open, guarded, insecure, grounded. That's why some people enter a room and instantly shift the vibe, because they've mastered themselves. And others walk in and nothing changes, or worse, the room gets heavier, because energy contaminates or elevates, depending on how it's built. You become more attractive when your energy is clean. When it's not trying to manipulate, not seeking approval, not bleeding unresolved trauma all over every interaction. That's not cold. That's maturity. That's emotional clarity. That's what people crave in a world full of noise and confusion. You don't need to say, "I'm confident." If your energy shows it, you don't need to explain, "I'm trustworthy." If people feel safe with you, you don't need to convince someone you're powerful if they sense it the moment you speak. Real attraction is felt, not performed. You become magnetic when you show up whole, not perfect. When your energy says, "I know who I am, I know what I bring, and I don't need to convince you." That doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you clear. And clarity is one of the rarest forms of confidence in a world built on confusion. People don't remember the exact words you used. They remember how their nervous system reacted to being around you. Did you calm the room or stir it? Did you feel grounded or were you reaching? Did you lead with strength or with need? These are the things that shape how others perceive you, and you can't cheat your way through it. You want to be more attractive. Regulate your energy. Take responsibility for it. Do the work to become emotionally stable, mentally disciplined, spiritually aware. Stop reacting to everything. Stop needing to control how people see you. Start focusing on how you manage yourself. True attractiveness begins the moment you stop trying to be liked and start embodying peace. Peace is rare. Presence is rare. Focus is rare. Most people are anxious, scattered, and disconnected from themselves. So when someone walks in fully grounded, they stand out without trying. That's what energy does. It separates you. It creates space around you. It pulls the right people in and pushes the wrong ones out. And all of that happens without you needing to lift your voice or list your accomplishments. Your energy will either clear rooms or change them. It will either expose your lack of self-control or express your inner discipline. You don't need more words, more opinions, more explanation. You need alignment. Because when everything inside of you is steady, people feel that. And when they feel it, they respect it. Even if they don't understand it, there is something deeply magnetic about a person who has clear boundaries. Not the kind of boundaries you scream about, not the ones plastered in captions and loud declarations. The kind that are unspoken but deeply felt. The kind that make people think twice before crossing a line. The kind that tell the world, I value my peace, I know my worth, and I will not bargain it for attention, comfort, or validation. Boundaries are not walls, they are signals. And those signals tell people how to approach you, how to speak to you, how to treat you. When your boundaries are clear, your presence carries weight. It's not about being aggressive. It's about being anchored. You don't need to say, don't disrespect me. When you've built a life that makes it clear disrespect isn't tolerated, you don't need to constantly remind people of your standards when your choices show it in every area of your life. The way you say no. The way you respond when someone pushes past your limit. The way you remove yourself from conversations, dynamics, and spaces that feel off. That is what makes you powerful. That is what makes you stand out, because most people are too scared to choose discomfort over acceptance. But the ones who do, the ones who walk away instead of explaining, who detach without guilt, who hold the line without shouting, that's rare. And anything rare becomes valuable. Boundaries make people respect you, even when they don't agree with you. They may not like your decision, but they'll remember that you made one. You didn't waver. You didn't fold. You didn't apologize for honoring yourself. And that sends a very specific message. You're not someone who entertains chaos. You're not someone who bends every time pressure is applied. That presence, calm, steady, secure, it draws people in because it represents something they're not used to. In a world full of over-accessibility, emotional leaks, and blurred lines, someone with strong boundaries becomes a lighthouse. And people can't help but be drawn to what feels solid, especially when everything around them is unstable. There's a confidence that comes from knowing you don't need to over-explain your no. You don't need to justify your distance. You don't need to validate your silence. You simply move in alignment with what protects your well-being. That's what makes you attractive. Not just in a romantic sense, but in all spaces. People want to be around others who are clear. People trust people who know what they will and will not allow. That clarity creates safety, and safety is rare. The moment you choose boundaries over people-pleasing, your life begins to shift. You lose noise. You gain peace. You lose quantity. You gain quality. You stop being everything to everyone and start being everything to yourself first. And that shift, people feel it. Having boundaries doesn't make you mean. It makes you self-aware. It means you've done the inner work. It means you've confronted the part of you that used to stay silent to keep the peace. It means you've faced your fear of being misunderstood, of being seen as too much, or too distant, or too serious. And you've chosen respect over being liked, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that being liked at the cost of yourself is too expensive. And once you taste the peace that comes with honoring your limits, you'll never go back to explaining your standards to people who benefit from you having none. Boundaries filter out the wrong energy. People who are manipulative, entitled, chaotic, they don't last around someone who's rooted, because they know they can't push the same buttons. They can't guilt you into submission. They can't bait you into over-explaining, into carrying their emotional weight, into abandoning yourself for their comfort. That's the power of boundaries. They don't just protect your time. They protect your energy, your values, your progress. They protect the healed version of you from the patterns that tried to destroy the old one, and people may test them. They may try to see if you really mean it. That's when your consistency matters more than your words. That's when your silence becomes your strength. Because a person who honors their own boundaries doesn't negotiate when things get uncomfortable. They don't shrink when met with resistance. They hold the line. And that kind of presence, steady, consistent, unwavering, is what makes you unforgettable. You're not just someone with opinions. You're someone with standards. You're not just someone with goals. You're someone with discipline. And discipline combined with clarity creates power. The kind of power that doesn't chase. The kind that walks in and everything else adjusts. Boundaries are not about separation. They're about elevation. They're about choosing what adds value and letting go of what doesn't. They're about moving with intention. About protecting your growth. About saying, I've worked too hard to build this piece to let anything unstable knock it over. You want to be more attractive? Learn how to say no without guilt. Learn how to walk away without drama. Learn how to stand still when everything around you wants your reaction. That is the kind of discipline that builds respect. And respect earned through boundaries becomes the kind of attraction that doesn't fade. There's something undeniable about a person who moves with discipline. They don't have to say they're strong. You see it in how they show up, how they carry themselves, how they follow through. Discipline isn't loud. It doesn't scream for validation. It speaks in consistency, in effort, in focus. You can feel it before you even speak to them. The way they walk into a room and don't need to announce themselves. The way they stay composed when things around them start falling apart. That's the presence discipline creates. A grounded energy that tells you I've done the work. I don't flinch. I don't fold. I don't depend on motivation. I've built myself for this. People often chase attraction by focusing on appearance, on charm, on clever words. But those things fade quickly if they're not backed by substance. And substance comes from discipline. From doing the hard thing when no one's watching. From showing up early, staying late, saying no to distractions and yes to purpose. It's not glamorous. It's not always fun. But it builds the kind of foundation that makes you unshakable. When you operate with discipline, you develop a different relationship with yourself. You trust yourself more. You stop breaking promises to your future just to please your feelings in the moment. And that kind of self-trust radiates from you. It shows in your eyes, your posture, your decisions. You become attractive when people can sense you're not fragile. When they see that you have order in your world. That you don't move based on moods. That you've trained your mind to override excuses. That's the kind of presence that doesn't just draw attention. It earns respect. Because in a world where people constantly chase shortcuts, a person who puts in the work stands out. You walk differently when you've earned your confidence. You speak differently when you've fought for your clarity. You're not easily moved by opinions, trends, or distractions. You're anchored in something real. Your own discipline. Discipline teaches you how to be quiet when your emotions are loud. It teaches you how to keep going when the hype fades. It separates the ones who say they want something from the ones who are actually becoming it. Most people don't lack goals. They lack consistency. They show up when it's easy. They quit when it gets boring. They disappear when results take time. But when you're disciplined, you don't rely on feeling ready. You rely on training. You've wired your identity around follow through. You don't need someone to clap for you. You've already decided who you are, and you prove it daily by what you choose to do when no one's around. That's what makes discipline magnetic. It's not just about getting things done. It's about how you move through life, with intention, with control, with standards that don't fluctuate based on mood or company. Discipline makes your energy different. It makes your conversations sharper. It sharpens your presence. And people notice. They notice that you don't waste time. That you don't complain. That you don't make excuses. That you show up prepared, focused, steady. And in a world full of chaos, that kind of stability is rare. It's rare, and that's why it's attractive. Because people are drawn to what they can trust. Discipline also filters your environment. It tells you who's aligned and who's just convenient. When you start choosing early mornings, clean boundaries, focused goals, and intentional silence, you naturally lose people who feed off chaos and inconsistency. And that's a good thing. Because now your life isn't just full. It's sharp. It's directed. You attract people who respect the life you've built. You no longer chase temporary attention. You protect lasting energy. That shift doesn't just make you more effective. It makes you magnetic, and discipline isn't about being rigid. It's about being free. Free from addiction to comfort. Free from dependence on approval. Free from the cycle of starting and stopping. When you build discipline, you build freedom from your lower self, the version of you that gives up, that gets distracted, that settles. And when you live above that version, you operate with a different rhythm. Your mind is clear. Your actions are intentional. Your choices are aligned. People feel that alignment. They see the result of your private discipline in your public presence. You don't need to tell people what you're working on. They'll see it in how you move. You don't need to convince people you're focused. They'll feel it when your energy doesn't entertain nonsense. You don't need to list your goals. They'll see them become reality in real time. That's the power of discipline. It turns your life into proof. Proof that commitment looks good. That structure is beautiful. That self-control is a form of self-respect. And when you respect yourself at that level, you don't lower yourself to fit into places that aren't built for people with standards. Discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you train, day after day, choice after choice. And once it's built, it becomes your edge, your confidence, your quiet power. And people are drawn to that power. Not because you're trying to be attractive, but because there's something rare about someone who moves with precision, while the rest of the world moves in chaos. Confidence isn't about how loud you speak, or how many people you can impress in a room. It's about how you carry yourself before you say a word. It's in your stillness. It's in the way you hold eye contact, the way you walk, the way you breathe when everyone else is in a rush to prove something. You can feel true confidence before you hear it. It's quiet, it's stable, it's composed. It doesn't need to broadcast itself. It just exists. People feel it without even understanding why. And that's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it attractive. Because the ones who really have it never need to explain it. When you're truly confident, you stop seeking permission to be in the room. You know you belong, not because someone said you do, but because you've earned your place with your actions, with your growth, with your discipline. You don't chase approval. You don't chase attention. You don't perform. You stand. You speak with intention, not to fill silence but to add weight. You no longer react to every look, every word, every doubt. You become rooted. And rooted people shift environments just by showing up. They make others take notice without saying a thing. That's the power of non-verbal confidence. It doesn't ask to be seen. It demands it without force. You can walk into a room and say nothing. But if your energy is aligned, people will sense your presence. They'll adjust. They'll pause. That pause tells you everything. It tells you that you've entered with power, not noise. Because people can't ignore what's grounded. They can ignore ego, they can tune out arrogance, but they cannot ignore certainty. When you speak from that place, your words don't just land, they cut through. You don't have to prove your intelligence, your strength, or your vision. You are those things. You don't advertise them. You don't beg people to see them. You live them. Confidence is in the way you handle pressure. It's how you move when eyes are on you, and when they're not. It's how you recover when you fail, and how you carry yourself when you win. It's not about being perfect. It's about being resilient. When you know your value, you don't shrink around others. You don't need to compare. You don't need to compete. You realize that authenticity is your power. And when you're authentic, when you stop performing and start owning, your very presence becomes a standard. You stop entering rooms to be liked. You enter to observe, to lead, to bring clarity, to offer value without demanding validation. People can tell when your confidence is real. It's in the little things. The way you listen without interrupting. The way you hold your ground without becoming aggressive. The way you say no without guilt. The way you speak slowly and with certainty. These are the signals that separate you from those who are trying to appear strong. Because trying always shows. Trying feels heavy. Real confidence is light. It doesn't push. It doesn't chase. It knows it has nothing to prove. And that energy, that calm, steady energy, pulls people in, not because you're trying to impress, but because you've mastered the art of presence. Non-verbal confidence also comes from preparation. From competence. From knowing your craft, your mission, your direction. You can't fake that. You either show up ready or you don't. You either know who you are or you're still guessing. When you've done the work behind the scenes, you don't need to brag about it. People feel it when they interact with you. They feel the hours you've put in, the emotional battles you've fought, the decisions you've made in silence. All of that becomes the foundation beneath your stillness. That's what makes you unshakable. That's what makes you magnetic. Because when your confidence is built on something real, people respond to it without knowing why. When you stop needing to be understood, you start operating with power. You don't overshare. You don't overcompensate. You say what needs to be said, and then you let your silence do the rest. That's confidence. The ability to not fill every moment with noise. The ability to not react when someone questions your worth. The ability to let people underestimate you and not feel the need to correct them. You know what you're capable of. You don't need them to agree. That self-assurance is rare, and it changes how people engage with you. The truth is, most people mistake confidence for volume. But volume fades. Volume can be copied. What can't be copied is composure. That deep inner calm that says, I've faced worse and I'm still standing. That's the kind of energy that changes how people see you. It creates respect before you even speak. And the best part is, it doesn't rely on looks or status or performance. It relies on discipline, on ownership, on choosing growth over ego. When you choose that path, you don't just appear confident. You become it, quietly, powerfully. Unapologetically, there's this common misconception that vulnerability is weakness. That opening up, showing emotion, or admitting struggle somehow makes you fragile. That if people see the cracks in your armor, they'll take advantage. So what do most people do? They armor up. They hide behind toughness, sarcasm, indifference, control. They convince themselves that silence equals strength and detachment equals power. But here's the truth. There is nothing more powerful than owning your truth without shame. When you are honest about your story, your scars, your battles, and you don't flinch, you become untouchable in a way that people don't expect. Vulnerability isn't about telling everyone your business. It's about being real with yourself first. It's about knowing what shaped you, what broke you, what rebuilt you, and being able to stand inside all of it without apology. You stop pretending. You stop hiding. You stop shrinking your story to make others comfortable. That level of self-awareness and self-ownership radiates a different kind of confidence. Not the loud, over-polished kind, the grounded kind. The kind people feel because it's rooted in truth, and truth makes people trust you. Because they know you're not playing a role, you're not trying to impress. You're standing in who you are, and that's rare. When you show up vulnerable, you create space for real connection. People aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to authenticity, to someone who's been through it and still shows up. Someone who doesn't fake strength but defines it differently. Because strength isn't the absence of emotion. It's the ability to feel everything and still move forward, still make the hard decisions, still set boundaries, still stay clear. That's what vulnerability gives you. Not chaos, but clarity. Because when you're not hiding, you're not wasting energy on performance. You're present, you're honest. You're aligned. People often confuse vulnerability with oversharing, but there's a difference. Oversharing is noisy. It's reactive. It's a way to bleed out in front of others, hoping they'll fix what you haven't healed. Vulnerability is different. It's intentional. It's quiet. It's measured. It's knowing the difference between exposure and expression, between needing validation and sharing from a place of power. When you speak from your scars, not your open wounds, people feel your growth. They feel your depth, and that depth is magnetic. Because in a world full of surface-level images and emotionally closed-off conversations, someone who's real is a breath of fresh air. The ability to be vulnerable is actually one of the strongest forms of emotional intelligence. It shows you have nothing to prove, that you're not building your identity around image, but around truth, that you're willing to be misunderstood by the shallow, so that you can be fully seen by the right people. That's not weakness. That's precision. That's strength under control, and it changes how people engage with you. They lean in instead of pulling away. They drop their walls because you've dropped yours first. Not recklessly, but with intent. And when done right, that creates influence that can't be manufactured. When you hide your pain, your insecurities, your fears, they control you. They leak into your decisions, your tone, your relationships. But when you face them, speak them, own them, they lose their power over you. Vulnerability is how you take your power back from the places that tried to break you. It's how you stop pretending and start living with integrity. And integrity is deeply attractive, not just in how others see you, but in how you begin to see yourself. You realize you don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need to have all the answers to be impactful. You just need to be honest. Honest about who you are, what you've lived, and where you're going. People are starving for real conversations, real emotions, real leadership. And you can't lead anyone if you're afraid of being seen. You can't connect if everything is curated. Vulnerability bridges that gap. It says, I've failed too. I've struggled too. I've been lost too. But I didn't stay there. I learned, I grew. I got stronger. And now I walk differently. I speak differently. I choose differently. That kind of voice doesn't need a spotlight. It becomes the light, because it gives others permission to drop the act, to be human, to grow without shame. And in that space, transformation happens. There's something incredibly powerful about someone who can say, this is who I am. Not because they want sympathy, but because they've moved beyond shame. When you live without shame, you become free. Free to speak. Free to choose. Free to leave what no longer serves you. Vulnerability creates that freedom. And that freedom creates authority. You're not held hostage by other people's opinions. You're not trapped in an identity that doesn't fit. You're not chasing worth in temporary praise. You've already claimed it by being honest with yourself. First, you want to be powerful. Start getting honest about what shaped you, what hurt you, what you learned, and then walk forward with all of it, not hidden but integrated. Because when your strength includes your softness, when your voice carries truth and not performance, when you can lead with both courage and compassion, you become the kind of person this world needs more of. The kind of presence people don't forget. The kind of energy that moves rooms without force. Most people think attraction happens when you walk into the room. When you look the part, speak the part, present yourself just right. But the truth is, real attraction doesn't begin when you show up. It begins when you're gone. It begins in your absence. In how people feel after they've experienced your energy, your standards, your presence. It's in what lingers when the conversation ends. It's in the pause people feel when they realize you didn't chase them, didn't overextend, didn't try to impress. You were there, fully, and then you weren't. And it's that space that reveals everything. That space either exposes that you were forgettable or unforgettable. You want to know who you are to people. Watch how they treat you after you stop trying to be seen. When you don't need to be everywhere, when you don't need constant attention, when you're comfortable being unseen, that's when you become powerful. That's when people start wondering what you're doing, where you are, why your presence felt different. Most people are addicted to being visible. They think being always available makes them valuable. But what actually creates value is selective access. What creates value is distance, because distance gives people a chance to reflect, a chance to feel the shift, to miss the energy you bring. And in that silence, in that absence, your presence becomes amplified. People remember how you made them feel when you were around, but they also remember how they felt when you were no longer accessible. That's when they realize the impact you had. And if you carried yourself with integrity, if you moved with intention, if you didn't beg for validation or overexpose your energy, that absence speaks louder than any performance. It becomes a mirror. It shows people whether they truly valued your presence or simply took it for granted. The way people respond to your absence tells you everything you need to know about your power. If they forget quickly, you were never being seen, you were being consumed. When you can walk away without making noise, when you can detach without causing damage, when you can remove yourself without explanation, that's when your silence starts speaking. Not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of self-awareness. You know your worth. You know your energy is not meant to be poured into empty spaces. You're not disappearing to punish anyone. You're stepping back to protect what you've built. Your peace, your focus, your elevation. And when people don't have constant access to you, they begin to pay closer attention. They begin to reflect. They begin to realize what you represented, what you brought, what you didn't tolerate. Absence sharpens the truth. It reveals who respects you only when you're present, and who still honors you when you're not available. It exposes who was really connecting with your soul, and who was only benefiting from your availability. That's why stepping back is not weakness. It's strategic. It creates clarity, and clarity creates power. When you become comfortable not being in the spotlight, you stop performing. You stop chasing. You stop molding yourself to fit places that don't deserve you. You let your absence do what your words never could. Reveal the truth. There's a difference between disappearing out of fear and stepping back out of strength. The former is avoidance. The latter is discipline. Because not everyone deserves front row access to your evolution. Not everyone should be allowed to witness your growth in real time. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is build in silence, elevate in private, and return when your presence can't be ignored. And when that happens, the people who overlooked you will feel it. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because your absence reminded them of what they lost. Access to attraction built on constant presence fades. It becomes ordinary, expected. But attraction built on selective energy becomes sacred. It becomes rare. You no longer feel the need to be seen to be powerful. You understand that your energy speaks louder in silence, that your absence is not emptiness. It's evidence. Evidence that you're not desperate for space, that you don't beg for belonging, that you've mastered the art of detachment without bitterness. That's what makes you magnetic. Not how loud you are in the room, but how deeply you're missed when you're not. The people who truly value you will feel your absence like a void. They will notice the difference when your energy is no longer there. And the people who only benefited from your presence will simply replace you, which tells you everything you need to know. That's why you don't chase. You don't beg to stay. You don't explain your decision to protect your peace. You exit with grace. And you let your absence speak in ways your presence couldn't. Not everyone deserves to have constant access to the version of you that is rare, intentional, and deeply aware of your worth. Your power is not in how you show up. It's in how you withdraw, in how you disappear without needing applause, in how you protect your presence like it's sacred. Because it is. Not everyone should get to experience your loyalty, your depth, your calm, your insight. These things are not mass-produced, they are refined. And what is refined is rare. And what is rare is valuable. And what is valuable does not chase anything that cannot see it clearly, even in silence, even in stillness, even in your absence.